Hello, my name is Jack Logan, and it is my honor to interview Doc Embry of the 5th Marine Corps Division from Vietnam. So, my first question is, do you think the war was necessary?
Yes, to a certain extent. We have to stop communism, and we have to stop radical communism like the Vietnamese and the North Vietnamese army and all the rest of the armies that fought in that war. And we can't do it at home. We don't want it here. So sometimes war is necessary. Sometimes you have to fight to be a man.
So, and with that, do you think... I'm going to go into the next section. So, do you think leadership was a help or handicap? Why? And how do you think it could have been better? And how would it have changed the war if it was better?
Number one, to answer your first question, yes, leadership was a problem. And the reason being is that the war was run from Washington, D.C. It wasn't run from the inner circle in Vietnam, because the generals in Vietnam had different opinions in what the congressman, the president, and all had in Washington. So absolutely. And what could have made it better? It could have made it better if Washington would have stayed out of that war and let the generals in Vietnam run that war. And also, along with that, we would have stopped listening to the radicals in this country that was really fighting against us in Vietnam. Our own soldiers, our Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines that were there. So yes, absolutely, the leadership was a huge problem.
So, how do you think it would have changed the war or the outcome? Do you think it would have a very serious effect, minor? What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, it would have had a huge effect because, as I just said, the generals there, the commanders in Vietnam, wanted to end that war. That war could have been ended in no more than a month. We could have wiped out the whole Vietnamese army in about a month, all of it. We were not allowed to do that because the powers to be in Washington would not let the commanders in Vietnam do their job.
Interesting. So, my next question ties into that. Do you consider the war a loss or more of a tire stalemate? No.
Well, I certainly do not consider the war a loss. We lost 59,000 brave American young men and women in Vietnam. So I don't look at it as a loss, no. What I look at it is a conflict of interest within its own self. Now, let me explain that real quickly. We should have never allowed that war to go on the way that it did. We could have ended that war, and we did not. And again, going back to your other question. So, yes, I think that the war was a win for those men who died in that war. Do I think it was a loss as far as us taking that country? No, we did not get the ground, but we certainly got the victory.
Great. So then, more personal question, how was your experiencing being a medic, and how did it affect you, and how has it affected you to this day and over time?
Well, it was an experience because I seen things that I probably would have never seen in my entire life. Now, I can just give you a quick imagination. You can imagine in your mind the worst car wreck that you could ever think of with a bunch of people in the automobile, okay? And you take that times 10, and that's what I've seen on the battlefield every day. And how did it affect me? I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I have nightmares. I have to see a psychiatrist 4 times a year. I'm exposed to Agent Orange. I have heart problems. I have a nerve disorder. And I have several medical problems because of what the war and what I've seen and what the country of Vietnam did to me.
Also, like, how did it affect you during the war? Like, how did it affect you during that time period? Like on the battlefield when you'll see these, horrible things. How did it affect you maybe like in the moment?
That's the easiest question to answer. It didn't affect me. You have one thought. Your thought is stay alive. That's the only thought that you have. You don't care how you do that. You don't care what you have to do that. I had a young son at home. I had a wife at home. I had people that loved me at home, and that's all I cared about was seeing them. I wanted to get back home to see them. So how did it affect me there? I didn't think about it, because if I did, it probably would have drove me nuts.
So then, how were basic training at the bases or landing zones?
Well, we didn't really have training at the landing zones or the inner bases in Vietnam. We were trained prior to getting there, but they could not train us to go where we were going. I wasn't trained in a jungle atmosphere where it was 129 degrees every day and where it was soaking wet every day. You got to remember, in Vietnam it was a monsoon season all the time. I stayed wet for the 16 months that I was there. And so training here in the United States done us no good. But we got OJT in Vietnam, on the job training. And you trained as you went, right then and there. How was the training? It was a life experience. So there you go. It's just like you wake up in the morning and you go to school and you come home and you're with your mother and dad, you're with your friends. It's the same thing in Vietnam. I woke up every morning. I fought the war. I went at nighttime came and I slept when I could, how I could, and where I could. So there wasn't any actual training other than the war itself, the life experience of being there.
And so how was the atmosphere there? Because I know it can be different. Because I know things in America were bad. People didn't really start focusing on the war, but when they did, it got really serious. How was the atmosphere there? Was it more of a jarring, you were reluctant to fight, or you needed to fight, you were really inspired, whatever phrase you may use, to fight the war and win?
This is probably going to be a tough one for me, okay? Because how I have to answer the question. No, there was no resistance. Every American fighting man there fought for our flag, fought for our freedom, fought for everyone back home. And then also, every day, all I had to do was take a 360 and look around me, and I seen what I was fighting for. When I got up in the morning, we would have 37 people in our platoon. When I went to bed at night, we'd have 12 people in our platoon. Why would you not fight? That's the reason to fight. So no, there was no resistance, none whatsoever, because we were fighting for a purpose, and that purpose was to get home and fight for our country, the freedom of our country. Now you asked me about the attitude back home. That was kept from us. We didn't know that Berkeley University was carrying on back then, and University of Pennsylvania was going on, and all these students were rebelling against us. Oh no, that was never allowed to be told us or shown us while we were in Vietnam. That was kind of taboo.
So, do you expect to have dramatically changed the soldiers' opinions if they have found out about the attitude back home and the feedback, or do you think just that purpose, that strong purpose, do you think that would have just carried you guys throughout it, or do you think the atmosphere back home would have changed the...
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you. I know when we got back home, it was totally different. But to stay on this subject, I don't think it would have made any difference, none whatsoever, to be honest with you, as I think back. Because we were fighting, again, for the purpose to come home, to stay alive. Now, what these idiots were doing back here, protesting and all this, if we would have found that out, it probably would not have made much difference to the fighting soldier, Marine, Air Forceman, Air Corpsman, or Navy guy there, because we didn't have time to focus on this. We were fighting war. This is serious business. War is not a game. It's a very, very serious business. And we didn't have time to focus on what you would call what they were doing back home. I had to focus every day on getting out of bed and staying alive to go to bed that night. I did not have time to worry about some jerk at Berkeley University and what he was thinking. I didn't give a damn what he was thinking.
Yeah, I respect that. I mean, I could see why too. It's just like they may be thinking that, but you probably know your family isn't thinking that. They're hoping you come home too.
It's absolutely correct.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go on to this question that is kind of on that topic. Do you think the way when you got back home, do you think it was justified, or do you think it was complete bogus or whatever? Or do you think it was justified the way some people were treated back home after just fighting the war, just fighting every day to stay alive, and then coming back and finding people with hatred when they don't really know the full situation?
Well, coming back to start at the beginning. Absolutely not. It was not justified. It was absolutely no reason for the Vietnam vet to be treated the way they were when we came back home. Let me give you some examples real quickly, because I think as a young man, you need to know what happened to us when we came home. And here's what happened. I got off of the plane in Oakland, California, and then when I got off of the plane, I had to come down a long corridor from the plane into the building that we were being welcomed home by. And there was probably 100, 150 protesters outside, and they were throwing bottles of urine at us. They were throwing feces at us. They were throwing firecrackers at us to make us jump because we had just came out of a combat zone. They were calling us baby killers. They were calling us murderers. Now, you got to remember something. We weren't on a hostile ground. We were now home. This was home to us. This is what we were fighting for. We were fighting for those idiots up on that hill. We gave them the freedom to do that nonsense they were doing. Reluctant? Absolutely, we were reluctant. What did it do to our attitude? I hated this country when I came home. 20 minutes after I was home, I would have just soon got back on the plane and went back to Vietnam, and this country could have floated away as far as I cared. Because that's how I felt then. That's how I felt then. We didn't have ticker tape parades. We didn't have bands playing. We didn't have presidents flying in and saying, "Welcome home." Oh, no. No. We were kicked out of bars because we were Vietnam veteran. We weren't allowed to have a drink. We were spit on and thrown at. Things thrown at us. That's what happened to the Vietnam vet. And that's how we were treated.
It's just not right, because I feel like when you're in that war, you're so emotionally and like physically tense. They're used to fighting and all that. And besides other disrespectful means, I also feel like the firecrackers is so wrong, because like you've been fighting there all your lives. You've been at the slightest noise that is hostile or out of the ordinary, it's a flinch reaction. It's what is happening, get ready.
Absolutely, and that's why they did what they did.
Yeah.
That's why they threw the firecrackers. That's why they threw all this other stuff at us to make us do that kind of stuff. And also, they really wanted us to commit acts of violence against them for we could go to jail. That's what they wanted. They wanted us in jail because they thought we were criminals. We just got done killing people 3 days before. We just got done doing things that we shouldn't have did. They think. But how do you fight a war? You don't write love letters back and forth. That's not how it's done. They don't give you a rifle. They don't give you a pistol. They don't give you grenade launchers, grenades, and everything else to go write love letters to the Vietnamese. That's not how it worked.
Yeah. Very so much. So, how was your family affected, and as a whole, during and after the war? Just about you being overseas, and again, a really important topic back home, and I'm guessing they were loving, but how did it affect them during and after the war, and what are your thoughts on that?
That's an excellent question. My family was a loving family, and they were very, very, very appreciative and very protective of me when I came home. and they were very supported for me. My dad was a World War II veteran. He's a combat veteran.